everyone. We'll give it just one more minute to get everybody in. All right, well, the hour goes by quickly, so why don't we get going, and more will join us as we go on. So hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Hebert, Director of Communications here at SANES, and I want to welcome you to the final session of the Region 10 Professional Learning Series, Dealing with Difficult Staff. Now, before we begin, we'll hear a brief word from today's sponsor, Harris Educational Solutions.
Harris Education Solutions has a long legacy of helping students achieve success. Through our numerous products, we have solutions that fit the needs of any district, from assessment and content curation, data and at-risk analysis, to teacher walkthrough programs. Whether you're working in your classroom or remotely, we can create custom solutions to support you and your students' path to growth and success.
Thank you, Harris. Okay, so as we begin, please remain in mute mode, and we'll use the chat throughout the presentation. Put your Q&As in the chat, and then we'll unmute when we get into some dialogue sections. And please note that this session is being recorded, and we'll be able to post it on the SANES website. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karen Bronson, our Director of Professional Learning. Karen?
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. And welcome. As Michelle said, this is the third leg of a series that we've done with Region 10, and the collaboration is just great there. I really want to thank Tony, Molly, and Mary for everything that they've done working with me and with us to get this series going. And I hope if you've been to our prior two sessions that you've enjoyed them and benefited from them, because we know how precious your time is, always, but especially now. So welcome again, and thanks for being here today. Just a reminder that we really want you to share during this hour, and you can do that either by sharing in the chat whenever you like, or unmuting yourself and sharing directly to us. And I've learned from Dr. Lavelle Brown, who I'm doing a kind of 9-part equity series with, don't worry about it. Okay, don't worry if you're raising your hand and nobody sees it. If you want to chime in, just unmute yourself and talk, and we will go to you, okay? So please just try to share any way you can. Alrighty, so we're going to get started. And if you don't know me, I'm Karen Bronson. I'm Director of Professional Learning for SANES. And in that role, I really get to do a lot of wonderful things around our annual conference. We have another great one coming up this October at the Sagamore. You'll certainly hear a lot more about that, as well as any professional learning needs that come to me and to us from our members and our regions. So with that, I was invited to do a little conversation today, and it really is a conversation more than a presentation, about the challenges of dealing with tenured staff in general. And when I thought about this topic, which is one that I am very familiar with, both from difficult, hard-won personal experience in the field and professional learning work that I've done with others in the past few years, this is the topic in terms of getting down, particularly to conversations. I think a lot of this topic keeps coming back to challenging conversations. And what I am going to try to do over this conversation is, we're not going to focus on the tenured part. I think challenging conversations are challenging conversations with staff. They're certainly more challenging when things are firmly in place systemically to make change harder. I mean, we can all definitely acknowledge that. But in the time we have today, we're going to focus on those challenging conversations. And by that, I mean, and I'm really going to just kind of speak from, the years that I was in the roles that you're in now. These conversations were the things that would really keep me up at night, particularly when I first got into roles of assistant principal, when I was doing observations as an assistant principal and then as a principal. if I knew, the night before that period 7, the next day, I was going to have that particular teacher, that tough nut, that one of a few in the building who is most resistant to learning and change. If I knew that was coming up period 7 the next day, the post-observation chat or whatever, I would be focused on that. And I would be doing all kinds of things. I could step out of myself and see myself dreading it, avoiding it. And then when it was actually happening, when period 7 got there, sugarcoating it, dancing around it, making small talk instead of having it. And somehow, often the time that we had allotted for this conversation had gone by. And sometimes I left feeling, well, that was a waste of everybody's time. Somehow I didn't even get to it. And that really took some time and some skill building that I had to seek myself at the time. So this is a tough topic. It was before COVID, but it especially is now because everything is tougher now, right? And we know, and we all believe in the word grace. I know it's something we've all heard a lot about through COVID, and it's a really important word. We have to show grace to others. And definitely we want others to show grace to us. And that is all very true. But we're still school leaders, and we're responsible for the safety, the well-being, the learning of our students in our schools and buildings. And sometimes the kind of difficult conversation we have hasn't changed that much from before COVID, but like everything else, it does seem harder now. So with that, let me share my screen and we will launch into our conversation. Can you see my screen? That's really good. Okay. So for starters, I'm going to welcome my co-facilitators who are your wonderful colleagues up in Region 10. And I asked them to just join me in the conversation, simple as that. And so I'm very, very happy to welcome Tony, Molly, and Mary. Tony, maybe you can just each introduce yourself a little bit and tell us your role, both your district and your SANES role. Tony?
Sure. First off, thanks for everyone for coming. So my name is Tony Cardone. I'm the Director of Elementary Curriculum and Instruction here in Baldwinsville. I'm also part of the Region 10 board and on the SANES board at the state level, and I'm the president-elect for next year for SANES.
Thank you, Tony. Molly?
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly Hagan. I'm the high school principal in Casanova. I'm also part of our Region 10 exec board. Mary and I together are the co-representatives to our region on the state board. And I'm just wrapping up some time with GRC as well.
Thank you, Molly, and welcome. Thanks. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Volkamer. I'm an elementary principal with the Oswego City School District. I'm on the Region Executive Committee and also on the state board, as Molly had mentioned. And it's great to see everybody here.
Thank you, Mary. We're going to start with a little bit of an individual reflection and just going to give you a couple of minutes to think about this a little bit. So what I'm going to ask you to do is think about a recent situation when you had to deal with a difficult issue with a faculty or staff member. Think about things like, what was the issue? Think about whether it was a new issue or a long-standing issue. Was it a motif? Was it a theme in your conversations with this particular teacher? Is it something that had really been frustrating for a long time? Or was it some more immediate, urgent kind of first-time issue? Think about how you responded to it or addressed it. Or maybe did you avoid it? Have what I just kind of shared as that little out-of-body experience with yourself, right? Look back at yourself having that conversation. How would you characterize it to yourself? How would you have preferred to respond or address it? Maybe you walked away from it feeling that was pretty good. I actually got down to the meat, and I really made some good points. And I think I think he or she heard me and I got some response, or maybe you walked away thinking, I wish I had done that. I know I should have done that, but I didn't. Think about some of those things. And finally, what skills do you want to develop to better respond or address similar situations in the future? Because like many things that we do as school leaders, it's skill building. It's not a natural gift, and it's not something we learn in what I refer to as principal school. Never learned it in principal school, how to have those difficult conversations. So let's just think for a minute. And while you're thinking, if you would like to, we would love it if you would post a quick thought in the chat, maybe just on one of the 4 bullets. What skills do you want to develop to better respond? If not, you can just keep the whole situation in your own pocket and just think of it to yourself. But if you want to share something in response to any of those questions, please do. So let's just take a minute or 2 to do that. And feel free to please throw some little comment or thought up in the chat if you'd like to. Okay, so keep those thoughts in mind. We're just going to watch a brief video. Michelle? This video is Mel Robbins, who does quite a few human resource videos.
Okay, Karen, I need you to stop sharing so I can share.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
%90 of their time working on their business, but you spend most of your time putting out.
Stressful conversations are unavoidable in life, and in business, they can run the gamut from having to fire somebody, which is like the most gut-wrenching thing you will ever have to do, or admitting failure, that you really blew it, or another thing that you might have to do is deal with the customer who's really upset.
How about a smoothie? What's in that?
Smoothie's a juice drink. We want coffee.
And I think it's very natural to want to avoid those conversations like the plague. But especially in business, there's an epidemic right now of people that are unwilling to have uncomfortable conversations. Harvard Business School just did a study and they found that 67% of managers are uncomfortable talking to the people they manage. And this gets me to what I want to talk to you today. It is the secret to how to have a difficult conversation. Because what's critical is learning the skill of untangling your emotions from the subject matter and being able to go face to face with anybody and have that difficult conversation. There are 4 techniques that I use whenever I'm going to have a difficult conversation that help me stay focused on what I need to talk about instead of getting hijacked by my emotions. Number 1, I always start the conversation by acknowledging my responsibility in the mess that we have to talk about. Whether it's the fact that I've avoided dealing with this sooner or whether there's something that I've done that's contributed to the situation, I acknowledge it right up front. And one of the reasons why that's so important is because by accepting some responsibility, you're diffusing the other person's emotion, you're also honoring them a little bit, and it sets a much more level playing field for when you get into the difficult things that you need to talk about. It's also going to put the person that you're speaking to a little at ease, so they're going to be able to listen. Number 2, you want to have a goal. Never go into a difficult conversation without an outcome defined before you go into it. The reason why the outcome is so important is because this conversation is going to be a roller coaster. The person that you're talking to might get upset. You yourself might feel emotional at some point, whether you're angry or you're triggered or you get sad. And so when you ride the roller coaster of emotion, the thing that is going to stabilize your thoughts is the outcome that you're causing. You're having this conversation because you're committed to making the relationship better. You're having this conversation because this isn't working, and so we need to end it powerfully. You're having this conversation because you want to give somebody some feedback that's not so fun to tell them, but you're giving it to them because you're committed to their success. Okay? So that goal, you feel yourself getting emotional, you come back to it, you come back to it, you come back to it. Third thing you're going to do a lot in this conversation, you're going to listen and you're going to validate. So you're going to say what you need to say, and then the other person's going to react. And instead of arguing or debating, I want you to listen and I want you to validate what the person is saying. It may sound counterintuitive, but honestly, one of the most powerful things you can do in any conversation, whether you're fighting with your kids over curfew, or you're arguing with somebody at work over workloads, whatever it may be, is hear where the person's at.
Listen to me, listen to me.
The moment you say, wow, that must be really tough, what you're dealing with, or, oh, I totally get why you now were avoiding me. If I felt the way that you felt, I'd probably do the same thing. The second you validate somebody, they immediately stop defending themselves. It's unbelievable, actually. Unbelievable. You've got to try it. Validate, validate, validate. It is the most powerful thing. And then once, of course, they feel validated that you've heard them, now they can listen. And that's when you come back to the final thing, which is you're going to restate always the outcome. Keep coming back to it. Keep coming back to it. And yeah, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy. You're going to have all kinds of emotions come up because you've been avoiding this conversation. But I'm telling you right now, if you find the confidence and the courage to go and to start this thing, acknowledge your responsibility, have an outcome in mind, validate the other person, validate, 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 and keep talking till you hit that outcome, you're going to be really, really amazed at how much easier these things become. And if you want to make it even easier on yourself, rehearse it with another friend first, somebody that's not involved in the situation. Because again, difficult conversations comes down to one important thing: the ability for you to separate your emotion about doing it from the things you actually need to talk about and the outcome that you want to cause.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. All righty. At this point, I'm going to ask Tony, Mary, and Molly if you could just kind of share some thoughts at this point, either related to the individual reflection that you did, or perhaps how something in that reflection relates to and connects with a point that Mel Robbins made in the video. Any suggestions in the video that resonated or not? Tony, maybe you'd like to get us started.
Sure. So, the part where she says to separate the emotion, which is an Italian Lebanese guy, it's not an easy thing for me to separate from. So the other piece was, find a friend. So if I look through my history of leadership, yeah, I definitely have had some very strong mentors and people around me that I could turn to, and I could unload and close the door and be like, I'm going to kill that person and, let it all out, and then come back to really, how is the behavior, whatever it is, how is it affecting a kid? Because if I start with that, I've learned it's hard to fight that piece. So, a couple of different things that came to mind were, a teaching assistant at one point who, I was brand new. It was my first time being a principal. I'm new in the building. Everyone has been there much longer than I have. And, established culture, all of that. And they've always thought they were a close staff and they're great with kids. And this one person I would get repeated, either students coming down, you're talking little kids crying, or parents calling. And of course, anytime I would go to observe or stop in, she was doing everything perfectly fine. So I really had to think through, about how do I have this. So initially I did the whole, duck and cover. Like I did not address it right away. And that's a regret because I, put too many kids in the situation they shouldn't have been in. So, when I finally had the courage to say, I need to sit with her because it's also not fair to her, and just really state the facts. Here's what I'm hearing. Here's what I'm seeing. And again, if I have data and that's more than one student from one grade on one day, and a very specific information, it's all about, and again, she was tenured. So I knew she wasn't going anywhere. That was number one. What changes does she need to make, and how do I support her in that? And I'm not going to say it all went perfectly right off the bat. It didn't. It took time, but it did get better, because I think because my advice from my mentor was, bring it back to the kids, and how do you make this a better experience for the student? So that's what went through my mind as I listened to that.
Thanks a lot. And you really said a lot there, because that first part that Mel Robbins brought up about separating our emotions from the conversation, it's helpful for us to step back and think to ourselves, what are those emotions? What am I feeling right now? It could be, I'm feeling fear. Okay, for one thing, going into this conversation, because I know it's going to be rough. Could be, I'm feeling angry myself and very frustrated that, we've had this conversation, or this has been addressed multiple times before and nothing good is happening here. So reflecting yourself and kind of getting your mindset and even your body and your breathing set for the conversation is important. I think that, somewhere when I was kind of working on skills around this myself, someone said, relax your shoulders. That's such a simple thing. Relax your shoulders, relax your jaw before you have the conversation. Breathe, because your own posture projects the emotions that you are hopefully not going to put on full display in the conversation.
Yep.
But your body language helps you to relax, as well as hopefully projects a more relaxed kind of tone to have the conversation. So those things make a great difference. You also mentioned gathering good information, right? We have examples, we have some data. And most importantly, Tony, I think a lot of us can identify with, it's kind of, sometimes we have to think about, why did we get married in the first place 30 years ago? Why teachers got married in the first place to teaching, hopefully, is because they love kids. They did, and they still do. Even those who may be the toughest nuts that we have to deal with in these conversations really still have that genuine love for students somewhere there, and tapping into that, taking the hard shell away and getting to that better nature is also a part of these conversations. Conversations are not all the same. Same strategy doesn't work in two different conversations. We don't get the same outcomes, but these kinds of strategies are ones that we can help build in ourselves. So thanks for that. Mary, how about your thoughts?
Great point, Tony, about that with something that was kind of building. But I was thinking, I was connecting with a couple situations that was more about supervision of kids. And it was more of you found out about it and you had to address it right away, because it was something that, either caused a problem or a situation among students because of no supervision, or, possibly someone creating an unsafe situation for kids. So when I look at this, I am thinking more specifically about, one, acknowledging your own responsibility, but also validating an idea or the perception of the other person. So when I go into this, it's about, we definitely have the security outcome, right? We are responsible for supervising children and initiating that conversation. That's where I did begin. But then when I was actually listening and validating what was going on in their situation, it came clear that there were some pieces that, as a supervisor, that I could assist with, because it became problematic on their part of being able to provide adequate supervision when there's like a group of students in the classroom and some of their personal items are in the hallway. So it was helpful to actually listen, validate what they were doing, which helped inform me as the building administrator about how else we might be able to create a process or a procedure or a way of doing something a little bit different that provided what they needed, but it also got what we all needed, which was supervising children and making sure that they're in a safe environment. So.
Thank you, Mary. And Mary gets to the heart of the matter that, the big part of our role is not that we can fix and solve every problem or certainly fix everything and everyone like we would like to, but we're creating the conditions, right, for good outcomes. We're creating the conditions. We're doing whatever we can to make sure our folks have what they need from us and in general. So that part, Mary, especially around supervision, really listening to that person and maybe seeing the playground or whatever the environment is from their perspective and what they need. And that may be right now with short staffing and everything we're experiencing now, that might be more challenging than ever. So that listening part, that validating part, and maybe a light bulb goes off for us, like we need to provide more of some kind of support so that the supervision can be better in this particular space, or maybe a different protocol needs to be in place, is really just so important because we only see what we see. And that, it reminded me what we're talking about is so true, kind of in the observation process as well, right? So when we're observing a teacher in a classroom, we see what we see. And when we go to that observation conversation, one thing we want to do is not do all the telling, right? We want to do some good asking. We want to have some good, well-developed questions in the post-observation talk. And those well-developed questions are really important in these difficult conversations around multiple kinds of topics, right? Because we want to know maybe what we're missing in the situation that would help improve it, because we only see what we see. So that's a really valuable perspective. Molly, what are you thinking?
So Tony and Mary shared some similar themes that I was thinking of and reflecting on after watching the video. Two words that resonated with me really were courage and responsibility, right? We're human, just like those that we're dealing with are human. So some of these conversations, we have to recognize that they're difficult and, our emotions are high and, no one likes to have confrontation. So if you're dealing with a difficult conversation, I think it takes courage on the part of both parties, right? The courage to be honest and transparent. And then also, courage on behalf of the person to at times accept something maybe that was not going the right way or mistakes that they've made. So I think that we have that responsibility, right? And it's related to what Tony and Mary both said for student safety and supervision, and then also just student learning. I think bringing back conversations all the time, whether they're, difficult conversations, is bringing it back to how it's going to impact students and learning. And I found that is really essential in having those difficult conversations, because it's not personal. It's never personal when we're talking about the work we do with kids. It's really about what we're doing for our students. So those were the two words that really stuck out to me in having a difficult conversation, is that it certainly takes courage and it's our responsibility. So I really thought that was a powerful statement that she made.
Thanks, Molly. So you get us to that idea of common ground, right? Because in any difficult conversation, and I think Mel Robbins out there in the business world would agree, she's trying to find common ground, something we can all agree on in this conversation. And as Tony started us off, that the ultimate common ground for us as educators, for people who work with students, with children, is our prevailing concern and love for the students that we work with. And once again, I think, I have really had to deal with a lot of, difficult teachers who were very resistant to change per se and everything else. But I can't think of teachers who couldn't get back to that place of their own care, for students, and often for their content too, which is another kind of common ground piece that resonates with a lot of these folks. But definitely that care for students is paramount. Molly, you also mentioned not personalizing it, right? And I think we can all think about what we have as foundational understandings in these conversations. When we are having that post-observation conversation, we have the rubric, right? Remember rubrics, when all we had to think about were the rubrics and observations, right? But a powerful learning piece for me in the days when the focus was on the new rubrics, you're having the conversation with the teacher in the post-observation chat, and you're sharing with the teacher that you thought the level was maybe somewhere between developing and proficient, or basic and proficient, and you're giving reasons why. And the teacher is adamantly insisting that, and this particular indicator, that they deserve a 4, that it was highly distinguished. And instead of going into telling mode at that point, that's where you go into asking mode. Like, okay, tell me what I missed. Let's go back and read this line in the rubric again. Let's read this indicator together. You know, creates a culture for learning in the classroom. And here are the indicators for that. Which ones did I miss? Tell me something that perhaps I couldn't see from where I was sitting. Kind of put the ball in their park a little bit, because really we're representing the rubric, we're representing the district's code of conduct, all the policies that are in place for student safety and supervision. It's never going to be perceived that there she goes again, right? This is just something that she makes a big deal of in these conversations, but it really doesn't come from any place more significant than that. So referring whenever you can to the foundational understandings in your school or district can be important. So thank you for that. Let's go back to our slides for a moment. Hold on. Okay. I have a couple of quotes, and just to get us thinking a little bit more, I'd like to hear from some of you whether you agree or disagree. And you can post just that word in the chat if you would like, or a comment if you would prefer. But this is from one of the articles. Maybe, Tony, could you just read that quote for us?
Sure. In an ideal world, teachers and staff members would welcome feedback regarding their performance and work behaviors, positive or negative. Ideally, praise would encourage more of the same behaviors, and constructive criticisms would be accepted with an open mind, lead to self-reflection and a promise to do better in the future. But as most of you know, negative feedback is seldom accepted in this way. People tend to seek feedback when they have performed well and avoid feedback when they have performed poorly.
So just throw up in the chat, could be just the word, agree or disagree. Karen, I got a yep from you, Karen Urbanski. Tell us what you think. Why did you agree with that?
It's not really Karen.
Oh, it's you,
Yeah.
Chick. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Karen.
I thought Karen was here, but it's lovely to see you, Chick.
I'm not sure why I'm Karen, but I can play that role.
Okay. You never have too many Karens. That's what I'm
I think I just posted something in the chat that, made me think of how people react, how I react. If I feel resentful, or I feel I have a negative emotion, it's going to be pretty difficult for me to listen, first of all, and then change. So if that conversation is negative in nature, I think much of the time could be wasted because the person hasn't really heard why it's important for her or him to consider changing. And that's why I said in that post, I think that language is an important ingredient. What you say and how you say it is crucial in trying to make that conversation work. And therefore, I like the presenter's comments about rehearsal. I think rehearsing, and actually in some cases scripting ahead of time, can make somebody feel comfortable in delivering the message in a way that's going to hopefully reach the desired outcome.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment? Just chime in. You don't have to raise your hand.
Hi, this is Donna. Can you hear me?
Hi, Donna. Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm driving, sorry. I've been listening to all of you and I totally agree. And what the last gentleman just said, and it wasn't Karen, is that, you kind of have to use language and make that work for you. And if a person knows that they're going to go into a difficult conversation, their back is going to be up a little bit. So you kind of want to have that common ground and a way to, maybe start off by asking them, what did you feel worked about your lesson today? What resonated with you? What are you most proud of? And then there was a woman earlier that said, how can you be an assist? And we have to support in order to help them get better. So, maybe get that conversation to go that direction. And then when you bring up another element, like within the lesson, you can say, okay, so let's talk about maybe some areas where we can support and get granular, get objective, and maybe lay out specifics on how you can do that. So that if it's objective and that you're working and helping to support, then maybe it's an easier pill to swallow, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And Donna, I think you mentioned the word that jumped out at me in this quote is negative feedback, right? I think all of us who are leaders always have more to learn about how to give productive feedback. I think, once again, that's not something we know inherently. And there's so much skill that goes into it. I always think of coaches. I can watch coaches with my little grandkids, and the feedback that they are giving kids is true supportive feedback. It's specific, it's supportive, it's helpful. There's nothing negative about it. It really is designed to help the kid grow in that particular skill. And I think in general, not all of us who become teachers and then school leaders were coaches. And I don't think we are as good, I'll speak for myself, at giving quality feedback. We go negative really quickly. And we use words that are loaded, words that have tone to them. And, the result is a big turnoff, and really kind of digging ourselves in deeper into a negative set for the conversation. I just always go back to true coaching in terms of a good place to look and see what really good non-negative feedback looks like. Something certainly, many of us could get better at in terms of our own skill building.
Someone earlier said something about the human aspect, and everyone has a heart and it's personal and they're giving it their best shot. So you have to work with them and not be so, you have to think about it that, you're going to be insulting to someone that you want to help improve. But if they turn off on what you're saying, they're not going to improve, right?
Yeah.
There'll be more of a divide.
Very true. Let's go to our next quote, which is this one. Mary, can you read that for us?
Sure. When preparing for how to have a difficult conversations with teachers, the fear of an employee becoming defensive and the potential of a strained working relationship can prevent school leaders from engaging in honest feedback that is needed to improve district performance.
And if you wouldn't mind, continue with the next one because they're related.
Oh, sure. Conflict avoiders often delay giving feedback to others when they deem the conversation could be uncomfortable or contentious. As a result, the delay causes a disconnect in the employee's mind between the perceived poor performance and the tardy feedback. Conflict avoiders may also attempt to distort feedback or sugarcoat poor performance so it will seem less severe than it really is. The result is a message that fails to address the performance problem and will most likely fail to result in improved performance.
This is from an article by Chet Daniel, by the way, in K-12 HR Solutions. And it is one of the resources from this workshop. So you'll receive the article in full. It's pretty good. Take a minute to post in the chat, agree or disagree, or a word or phrase that kind of jumped out at you in either one of the two quotes that we just read. How about if you just post a keyword in the two that Mary just read for us? So let's look at what's coming up. Avoiding came up several times. Delaying the conflict, kicking the can down the road. Earlier today, not earlier in the chat, I should say, someone shared, I think I have to tell a teacher they aren't getting tenure. I'm confident in my decisions, but not looking forward to this. That's tough, right? We can sleep easier if we know that the foundational conversations leading up to that difficult conversation were there. That's why sometimes avoiding or kicking it down the road just, ends up having a real buildup effect and making the ultimate conversation a little later more difficult. See what else is coming up. The potential for a strained relationship. We want people, we're human. This is human stuff. We want our people to like us. We don't want to be the meanie. Okay, we treasure the strong relationships we have with our teachers. We don't want to strain them or ruin them. Few of us like conflict, and therefore it's hard to face in a conversation. It can confuse someone if you're not direct and clear. Let's hear from someone who is with us today, someone who's listening. What helped you in a difficult conversation? Can you give us any quick kind of example of how you managed to stick to the facts, or how you managed to navigate a challenging conversation in a way that you felt was effective when it was over? Who has something to share?
Karen, I can just chime in. Something that I'm committed to this year, it's something that is working positively for me, is that I am using the word transparent when I'm addressing the conflicts. And yeah. I think that puts people at ease. And I just say, like, flat out, I'm just going to be completely transparent. I'm going to let you know exactly what I've received, whether it's like the complaint from a parent or if it's a colleague. I just say right up front that you're going to get the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And I think that helps people to realize that we're being honest and just giving them the information that they need. And so I found that to be very helpful when I'm having difficult conversations, just to kind of preface it by saying this, I'm going to be completely transparent. I'm going to let you know exactly what's going on and not sugarcoat it. I think it helps put the listener or the person you're talking to trust you. And I've gotten responses from people saying, like, thank you, I really appreciated that. Like, they appreciate the honesty and the transparency. And I think that helps to help the dialogue along.
Molly, that's just a terrific suggestion. That one word, that one phrase really just kind of unlocks something. Let's say it takes the squirm out, you know what I mean? Because really that's what you're doing. You're being fully transparent and honest about information that you have received, a situation that you observed. And, you also getting to the importance of the starting comment in that conversation, right? The starting comment can either put people on edge or just kind of convey, this is what we're here to talk about. I'm being very transparent and I'm going to be very honest about what's come to my attention that we need to discuss. That one word that you are just kind of dropping here is one that I know a lot of us will just kind of take with us. And that's just a great way to start these difficult conversations. Any other thoughts? That was a great example. Who else has one?
I think I just had mentioned I was subbing for a teacher the other day, and she's a good teacher, good attitude, but the lessons were just old fashioned, like fill in the blank and just some teaching that is kind of past our time. And it's going to be a tough conversation because, like I said, she's a good teacher. She's a good person. She's got a good attitude. She's supportive of the building. So I think those are easy times to overlook maybe some poor lesson planning or some old school lessons that maybe have seen their better day. But I think that's a hard conversation to start with for people that you already, you care about, you have a relationship with them, and now all of a sudden you have to be critical of them. That's difficult.
Sure, absolutely. Any of our co-facilitators, any suggestion on how to begin that conversation? So we have, are you a principal in your building?
I am a middle school principal, yes.
You're a middle school principal, and you were subbing the other day. That's what everyone is doing all kinds of things now. And kind of the window you got into that lesson plan wasn't a really good one. And isn't this a good example of, what is your first name, by the way? I see M.
Mark.
Mark.
My video doesn't work, so I apologize.
That's okay. That's quite all right. But Mark, just so we have your name. So isn't this a good one that we could be tempted to just plain avoid? You know what I mean? Like, okay, I got enough going on. I was in that classroom subbing. That lesson plan was really, really lacking. I really felt badly for students who really weren't learning very much from it, but we're just going to move on. Let me hear it. Tony, what are your thoughts? How do we have this conversation with that teacher?
I mean, I empathize with Mark because, yeah, it is tough. It's a tough time for everyone. But at the same time, I guess my instinct is to bring it back to kids. I think it's always the safest. I know you were out and, you left a lesson plan. My challenge with the lesson plan was this: what did you intend for the students to do that day? Maybe have that discussion of what was missing, and take it from there. But you keep it to, students struggled with these concepts, or they seemed unclear about this, or the lesson plan wasn't clear in this area. It's really, you can have it in front of you as a third point to refer to. Those are the thoughts I'm having.
Thank you. And it's actually, as hard as things are, Mark, it's fascinating that many of you as school leaders are back in classrooms and teaching situations. It gives you a new appreciation, I think, for what is entailed in that, and even coming at it in a very collaborative way, in terms of, teacher was a teacher to a teacher. Here are some great question starters that I have found to be helpful. Maybe you will too. Once again, keeping the tone supportive, which is hard, is important, right?
Could I just chime in? I think you had mentioned it earlier, Karen, about asking questions.
Yep.
Because I know that I've got a post-conference with a teacher similarly. And I've seen this teacher perform very well, both unannounced and announced. And I guess I'm going to start with questions about, so tell me, what's going on? This is not indicative of what I've typically seen. Is there something happening that I'm not aware of? Just to kind of start a conversation, because if this is someone that you've been working with or supervising for a while, and it's something that's just recent that you've noticed, then my suggestion would start with questions. And I know Karen had brought that up earlier, that's sometimes we just need to seek to understand first, but then go back to what's the outcome, what's the goal? It's, what's best for kids. How do we make the changes necessary in order to make it happen?
Thank you. And yes, I think, going into the conversation with some good questions rather than just a bunch of things to say, is just a very, very helpful strategy, whether it's the post-observation conversation or just a conversation that's difficult, about anything else that could be occurring. So thanks for reminding us of that. I'm going to, you can take a minute and look at this next quote. Is kind of similar to some of the ones we've been reading. It gets into the nurturing style of management. We're supposed to be, here's our conflict, right? We are supposed to be nurturing, but on the other hand, we're focused on outcomes. We're focused on students who are feeling happy and safe and supported and learning and all of those things. And sometimes our desire to nurture kind of bumps up against what we want to see as good outcomes for students. So that's kind of where the rub is. And that's why kind of some of the strategies and skill building can really help. I'm just going to move a little through some other things I'd like to share with you before we're at the hour. One is, and you'll get this PowerPoint if you would like to look at these links. One of them is a link to the article, and there's a pretty good free resource, how to open the can of worms, about conversations with teachers. And you can actually get the, I believe, the PDF or the ebook of that resource. But I'd like to share another few tips with you. And I think Michelle has this one at the ready. It's an article from Reach Out Schools that I thought was helpful. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And maybe, Michelle, you can share that article with us on the screen.
Okay, you seeing it?
Yep, we are.
There you go.
Okay. And we can just kind of move up. There are 6 suggestions here. You will get the article. Once again, our time's very short today, but let's just run through them quickly. So hold on for a minute. So let's look at the first one. So be prepared, right? You're going into the conversation. You don't want your nerves or emotions to get the better of you, as Mel Robbins kind of started us off. That's the last thing we want to happen. We might make our opening statement about transparency, honesty about something that has come to our attention, as Molly suggested. And we're also going to come with some data. We're going to come with accurate information, but we're also going to remember we don't have all the information. I think one thing that many of us learned when we were newer leaders is that we entered some situations with students, with parents, with teachers, you name it. We entered some situations thinking that we were suited up with the information. We had done the information gathering and we had it, only to find out we didn't, okay? Or the information that we had was faulty, incomplete, etc. So the more we can prepare is the better, but we're also going to be very cognizant of what we don't know. And the person we're having the conversation with is going to help fill us in a little bit on what we don't know. That's part of the process. Let's move up to number 2. The all importance of listening to what the other person is saying, not trying to talk over, be ready to learn something you don't know. Move up to number 3. Clear, direct communication is a big part of tackling difficult conversations. Number 4, looking at a situation from the person's perspective is extremely important, and really asking yourself prior to the conversation some of the bulleted points there. What are some reasons that this person might have acted this way? Is this chronic? Have we seen this before? Or is there really something going on right now? We can name many things that are going on right now that are very different, that may shed light on this particular situation that we are dealing with. And of course, it's possible that there are a number of complex factors contributing to the situation. Back to what we don't know, I think we've all learned that with students. Sometimes we've had students who are acting out, and we find out things that that student is dealing with at home, some really, really stressful, hard, difficult situation the student is dealing with that we didn't know anything about. And if anything, it makes us amazed that the student is doing as well as he or she is every day. So once again, this is human stuff, right? People don't often know what we're going through at home in our own lives that we bring to school with us on a particular day, any more than we happen to know what they are experiencing. So I think that's where that all important grace word comes in, especially now. Trying to reach a compromise, right? So we're problem solvers, right? We want to solve problems when we can. And one of the best ways we can do this is to look for that kind of middle ground, to look for some reasonable kind of compromise. Consider involving a support person. How about a comment on that one? A real quick comment. Any of our co-facilitators or anyone listening, was there a time in a difficult conversation you had with a teacher? Let's stick with the conversation with a teacher, where involving some support person was helpful.
I mean, you know, I know it's always scary to have that union person in there, but depending on your relationship with the union, you know, there's been many times I've had a pre-meeting with that union rep to say, you know, here's what the situation is, you know, here's my thought of where this might go. You know, have a conversation with them, especially if, you know that there's maybe some outside circumstances impacting the performance of the teacher. So just sort of trying to, you know, bring that person in to support you, but also to support, you know, the teacher, you know, during that time period. So that's one thing that comes to mind.
Right. And all of these conversations are different. They're on different levels, right? But if something is particularly volatile, we want to make sure that we extend that invitation whenever possible too, for the teacher to bring a union person if they would like to, so that everyone hears the conversation the same way. But once again, you know, those are more extreme kinds of examples, but support is good. Finally, agree to disagree. Sometimes we can and sometimes we can't. Back to Mary's example, it's a question of student safety and supervision. We can't agree to disagree. We really have to get to that point of understanding that goal and that outcome that Mel Robbins spoke about to begin with in a situation like that. So that may or may not be appropriate to whatever situation we're dealing with. And finally, and so all important right now, taking care of yourself. Okay, thanks, Michelle. Taking care of yourself and doing whatever you can to be mindful of your own, you know, stressors right now is extremely important. I'm just going to, Michelle, you can stop sharing, and I'll just share a few little parting thoughts as we wrap up. Oops, lost my thing here. There you go. Okay. Okay, so just remember that we are all doing the best we can each and every day. And it's not easy right now, but we are all going to continue to do our very best. And I hope today we have left you with some thoughts and some strategies that are helpful. Let's just look at our chat for a few parting comments. Hold on. And see. Oops, I missed the chat. There we go. Chick, can you just share that strategy that you shared to depersonalize the conversation?
Sure. Sometimes with, at least I've experienced with conversations, if there's nothing, this is probably not the best of terms, but I find it distracting in a positive way to have something for both the administrator and the, let's say, teacher or staff member to focus on that has to do with the reason why you're in the meeting to begin with. And literally a piece of paper that has what the conversation should be about. It sometimes works effortlessly where since you're physically looking at the paper or looking at, I'll say some examples would be, kids' test results, or it could be part of an observation that the administrator did. It could be, most anything that is relative to what you'd like to accomplish. It just seems much more comfortable, and the conversation can flow more smoothly and positively if it's not just face to face with nothing to actually hold in your hand or to refer to. It does really work well. And yes, you have to have, the other ingredients, like you have to use the, appropriate language and focus on many of the things that were shared. But I found that simple strategy is an advantage rather than just going into a conversation face to face.
Thank you for that. Mary, can you just share with us your parting comment there? Because I think it's a really very important one.
Well, everyone keeps saying, take care of yourself, take care of yourself, take care of yourself. And it's hard to do. But I know from personal example, I have a group chat with the other elementary principals, and we reach out to one another when we need to talk about something. And being part of SANES and being part of Region 10, we've got a lot of different colleagues that we could reach out to. At least talking with people who are understanding what you're going through and running into the same types of situations, may not be exact, but similar. It really is helpful for that, not only the reflection, but also preparing for types of situations. So don't be afraid to reach out to the colleagues and making great connections. You're going to find out we got a lot of great people out there. So, and we all are the knowledge base. It's not, no one's the expert.
That's really true. Somehow the experts all kind of got out of town a couple of years ago, and we're all figuring it out, right?
Yeah.
So, right, not feeling like, you're all alone in this, but that connection with colleagues. And once again, in our little video at the beginning, sometimes you have to have a reality check, and you need to run something past a colleague and see where, if you're in the right place with it, and then maybe kind of get the gist of the conversation that's coming up with that colleague. So we do still very much more than ever get by with help from our friends, and you have many of them out there, everyone, in SANES and every place else. And we're just happy that you joined us today. And we hope that you leave this hour feeling good and feeling like you picked up a few little tips or resources that could be helpful. So I just want to end by thanking, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Molly, Tony, Mary, and everyone for coming today. And everyone just have a great evening. Enjoy your evening. Take care. We'll see you soon.